Hello, my name is Nicholas Parsons, and as the minute waltz fades away once more, it is my pleasure to introduce to you the four exciting and diverse personalities who this week are going to play Just a Minute. We welcome back Derek Nimmo, Wendy Richard, and Paul Merton. And also we welcome for the very first time Stephen Fry. Will you please welcome all four of them? Beside me sits Anne Ling, who is going to keep the score and also blow her whistle when the 60 seconds are up. And as usual, I will ask them to speak if they can without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject which is on the card in front of me. Let us begin the show this week with Paul Merton. Paul, the subject is what to put on a muffin. Will you tell us something about that in this game, starting now?
Well, I suppose there's all kinds of things you put on a muffin. You can have butter, jam or marmalade, or indeed you could put a bicycle on top of a muffin. Anything at all, really. I don't know anything about muffins and this subject bores me rigid, I'm afraid. But what more can I say about it I haven't said already? I can say lots of other things.
And Derek Nimmo...
Repetition of say.
Yes, what more can I say and what can I say? Derek got in with a correct challenge, so he gets a point for that, of course. He takes over the subject of what to put on a muffin. There are 40 seconds left, Derek, starting...
Muffin the Mule is a charming little quadruped, much seen on children's television, who's now making a comeback. I awfully like Muffin. Terribly funny and amusing and charming, don't you think? Also, what's the matter?
Wendy...
I think that's the wrong sort of muffin. I think you've gone completely off your trolley.
But could you...
It could be any kind of muffin.
It could be any kind of muffin. I wondered if you could actually understand what he was talking about, could you?
I was trying to put a bit of peace into it.
Yes.
That's the only time I've ever heard you speak quickly. Normally, you string it all out so you can get the 60 seconds.
Well... Wendy, no, I mean, you can take the subject any way you like, and he decided it must be Muffin the Mule. Derek, you have another point. 30 seconds are left, starting now.
In the 19th century, a muffin was a man who followed young girls. And I suppose in that case, you would put onto a muffin a policeman to make sure they didn't do anything improper with the ladies that he was pursuing. Onto a muffin, which is like a crumpet, I would put, of course, butter and jam and honey and all those lovely gooey things which I enjoy hugely. Muffin the Mule I would have put on... What's the matter?
And Stephen Fry has challenged.
I think that's our second mule. I think we had one in a previous version when you first talked to us.
Absolutely right.
You've never played the game before, and you very cleverly got in with 1 second to go. So what to put on a muffin is a subject with you, having gained a point, of course, for a correct challenge, and you start now.
Marmalade, of course, is...
So at the end of that round, Stephen was speaking as the whistle went, and whoever does that gets an extra point, so he has 2 points into the round. Derek Nimmo also has 2 points, so they are equal in the lead. And Stephen Fry, will you take the next round? And the subject we've chosen for you is Wilhelm Furtwängler. Can you tell us something about it? I'm sure it's been specially chosen for you, but there are 60 seconds to keep going if you can, starting now.
Well, Wilhelm Furtwängler, as he should probably be pronounced, because there's an umlaut on the A in his name, was a great Germanic conductor of particular...
Derek Nimmo...
It's unfair, rather lot of words.
Yes, there were.
Somebody so bright as he, you should
Awful
be able
lot
to
of
speak
words.
sort of properly.
But he's never played the game before, and
right.
I think, really, that was a bit... Stephen, I'm not going to allow that.
Well, you're an old sweetie.
Because you were interrupted.
Thank you.
And,
Nobody's ever called him that before.
No. Stephen, you have 49 seconds to continue with the subject, Wilhelm Furtwängler.
Well, Wilhelm Furtwängler was noted chiefly for his interpretations of Wagner, the great German composer of opera and so forth. He performed many times at the Salzburg Festival, where he got quite a reputation, oh my God, I'm completely mistaken. Do you know, it's a lot more difficult than it seems when you're listening on the radio. My respect for Paul and Wendy and Derek, which was previously at rock bottom. It's extraordinary. These people are brilliant. I don't know how they do it. Never mind, carry on.
Paul, you challenge first. You have the subject, and there are 36 seconds left. Wilhelm Furtwängler, starting now.
Wilhelm Furtwängler was the winner of the Silliest Name competition in 1956. He won several years in a row after that, right?
Derek Nimmo challenge.
He won twice.
He won 2 months. Stephen Fry.
This is impossible because he died in 1954.
Yes, but his name lives on.
I think the one you were talking about, the real one, was different to the one Paul was. So, Derek, you had a correct challenge. 26 seconds on Wilhelm Furtwängler, starting now.
I was wandering in this rather seedy part of Hamburg, and this man came up to me and said, "My name is Wilhelm Furtwängler," I thought he said. But he said, "No, it's Furtwängler." I thought, what an extraordinary thing.
Stephen Challenge.
There was an extraordinary hesitation, I thought.
Yeah, extraordinary hesitation, I quite agree. And you have 13 seconds on the subject, starting now.
His interpretation of Tristan and Isolde with Alfred Suthaus as the eponym, and why did I bother?
Derek, another point and 8 seconds on the subject, starting now.
I have many records when he was conducting, and I do think they're amongst my most treasured possessions. Unfortunately, I only have them on long playing.
Derek Nimmo was then speaking again as the whistle went, gained the extra point and has moved his lead even further forward. Stephen Fry is still in second place, then comes Paul Merton and then Wendy Richard. Derek, your turn to begin. The subject is wearing spats. Will you tell us something about it in just a minute? You can start now.
Now, wearing spats is a question I would very much like to have because for some considerable time I played in a play called
Wendy Richard Challenge.
Hesitation.
He'd forgotten the name of the play he was in, yes. Wendy, you've got in with a very sharp challenge on wearing spats. 54 seconds are left, starting now.
I think spats are a lovely men's fashion. My father used to wear spats. I think it's very elegant. Apart from that, it also helps you save on shoe polish because you only have to clean the part of your footwear which is showing below and around the spats. They used to come in various colours and you can get several little buttons or just one or two fasteners on the side. As I said before, I've repeated myself.
Derek Nimmo Challenge.
repetition.
Of what?
Self-confessed repetition, as she said before.
As she said before, yes. I have to be sure, because sometimes you challenge just has to bluff one out of it. Derek, correct challenge, 30 seconds, wearing spats, starting now.
Originally were part of military wear, and you still see them with the Scottish Regiment. In the summer, they were worn in white canvas, and in the winter months...
Wendy
I
Challenge.
think he's hesitating, you know.
No.
You
he
don't
didn't.
think
No,
so?
He was very close. No, I don't think that was a
One moment I'm going too fast, and the next moment I'm going too slow.
I know, but
No.
I've got the measure of you now. I know.
For our listeners, Wendy and Derek Nimmo are sitting on one side together, and Derek's now got his arm round Wendy, and Stephen Fry and Paul Merton on the other side.
I haven't got my arm round Paul, but... yeah.
I know people like to have visual images of the people who are performing. 21 seconds for Derek on wearing spats, starting now.
Spats are the spawn...
Paul Merton Challenge.
For the people at home who like visual images, I would like to point out that I'm wearing a jumper.
Those who are concerned with the sartorial wear of the cast, Nicholas Parsons is in a sports jacket, Wendy is wearing a floral dress with a scarf, Derek Nimmo's in a smart suit with a waistcoat, and of course Stephen Fry is wearing dinner jacket. Who challenged?
I made a joke, Nicholas. It's short-term memory. That's your problem. It's difficult, it's sad.
Your jokes, some of your jokes are short-term memory in my case. But it was an interruption, so unfortunately Derek does get a point, and he continues with 20 seconds on wearing spats, starting now.
Spats are the spawns of shellfish, and if one was going to wear them, I suspect it'd be better to put them on the edge of a hat, rather like Antipodeans wear corks, because they really would be rather niffy. The spats that you wear on your feet...
Paul Merton Challenge.
Repetition of where?
Yes, you've been wearing...
Absolutely.
Yes, because wearing is on the card, but wear is not to be repeated. So 6 seconds for you, Paul, on wearing spats, starting now.
My grandfather was a great man for wearing spats. He used to wear them on all sorts of occasions.
Well, Paul Merton was then speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point. He's equal with Stephen Fry in second place, Derek Nimmerston in the lead, and Wendy is in fourth place. And your turn to begin, Wendy. The subject, forecasts. Can you tell us something about that in this game, starting now?
I never take any notice of weather forecasts because I don't believe they have much accuracy about them at all. I also include in forecasts the horoscopes. Now, just last week, I read mine and it said, you'll be hearing of a large sum of money. The only 2 letters I received that day, one was an income tax demand for an incredible amount of money, and the other, a demand for several more pounds.
Paul Merton challenged.
Unfortunately, repetition of demand.
Yes, they were demanding too much from you, Wendy. And so, Paul's got him with the correct challenge. Another point to him, and 36 seconds left on forecasts. Paul, starting now.
There are all kinds of people who try to forecast the weather through amateur means. They hang up seaweed outside their window, or they look at what the cows are doing in the fields. There's all other kinds of...
And Stephen Fry challenged.
Lots of alls and kinds.
Yes, there were indeed, Stephen. Well, listen, 23 seconds for you to tell us something about forecasts, starting now.
Me and my...
Paul Merton challenged.
Hesitation.
Indeed, yes. 22 seconds for you, Paul, on forecast, starting now.
Hesitation.
Yes, indeed, Derek, a hesitation there. 20 seconds for you to...
Standing in the Blackwater River, which is a tributary of the Bewley, I had to make at least 4 casts before I hooked my salmon. I was using a collie dog, which is a rather curious fluffy fly, but very effective if you are in that particular water looking for that.
Paul Merton challenge.
Repetition of water.
Yes.
Blackwater is one word.
That's right, you were Blackwater. Well done. Yes, sorry. Bad luck. Well tried, yes.
Yeah.
6 seconds for you to continue, Derek, on forecast, starting now.
I never miss the weather forecast on television because of the little funny manner it makes me laugh a great deal.
Paul Merton challenge.
Deviation is a weather forecast on just now and you've missed it. Did you never miss the weather forecast?
A very clever challenge of deviation, Paul. You've got him with 1 second to go on forecast, starting now.
All kinds of betting systems.
Cleverly got back with only 1 second to go, and he's now moved into second place, just ahead of Stephen Fry, and only just 3 points behind Derek Nimmo, and Wendy's still trailing a little. Stephen, it's your turn to begin. The subject is New York.
New York, New York. So good they named it...
I was too quick on my buzzer.
Well, you were actually, because I hadn't actually told him to start.
Oh, hadn't you? Oh, we'll start again.
The subject is New York, and you start now.
New York, New York. So good they named it twice, the old song goes. Of course, people who live in that city have the address twice because... Oh, hell, I said
Wendy,
twice.
twice.
I said it because I knew Wendy would get it. That's really good.
Yes.
I'm pleased.
Very chivalrous, I thought.
Shivers. Good Lord, the things they say when they don't succeed. 51 seconds for you, Wendy, to take over New York, starting now.
I have never been to New York, but I do look forward to paying a visit there, hopefully in the new year. I understand.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, I'm afraid. So the thought of going, she hesitated. 45 seconds, Danny, tell us something about New York, starting now.
New York was originally called New Amsterdam, but then it was bought by us, or rather filched by the British, and rechristened New York. Unfortunately, though, one particular area is still named after a Dutch family, the...
Stephen Fry challenge.
Oh, did you say named twice, or have I gone completely
he
mad?
didn't
Oh, what a
say
pity.
named twice. Yes,
So
it
I
was,
did say it
yes,
twice.
it was named, that's right. It was New Amsterdam. It was named
Yeah, I thought you
New
did,
Amsterdam.
Nick
and-
wouldn't have picked it up.
No, no, of course not. No. Sometimes you wonder why I'm here, according to Derek Nimmo.
Absolutely.
Stephen, you have a correct challenge on 32 seconds on New York, starting now.
I like the Isle of Manhattan, smoke on your pipe and put that in, as one lyricist had it. The great thing about New York, the metropolitan area, is it comprises Staten Island. Oh, it's so
Paul.
tense.
Hesitation.
Yes.
Yeah, rather.
12 seconds for you to tell us something about New York, starting now.
I want to be a part of it. New York, New York. That is the way the rest of the lyrics go to that particular song that Stephen mentioned earlier. What a wonderful metropolitan city.
Well, Derek is still in the lead. Then comes Paul Merton and then Stephen Fry. And Wendy, surprisingly, is in fourth place. Derek Nimmo, it's your turn to begin. The subject is BBC Radio. Will you tell us something about that subject in this game, starting now?
In the United Kingdom today, we have BBC One and BBC Two, BBC Three, BBC Four, BBC Five, BBC Radio Nottingham, BBC...
Wendy.
He's listing. Now, we had this out last year, didn't we? We're not doing lists.
But you don't, actually. You have Radio 3 and Radio 4. It's not BBC 3 and BBC 4, so it was deviation, wasn't it?
Yes.
Absolutely right, Wendy. So you have 46 seconds for you to tell us something about BBC Radio, Wendy, starting now.
I have had the good fortune to work for BBC Radio on several occasions. I always enjoy this as I see my dear friend Anne Ling and Nicholas Parsons. A pleasure to see any of them.
Paul Merton
I'm
challenge.
afraid repetition of C.
Yes.
As well as
so much
hideous
drinking.
sycophancy, I mean.
This is coming good from somebody
I might
called
have been
Nicholas
going to
Sweetie earlier.
I might be
bare
going to say
truth.
something nice about you see. You don't know.
Yes.
You'll never know now.
Yeah, that's any way to keep going. It doesn't matter. Paul, you had a correct challenge. Another point. 34 seconds. BBC Radio starting now.
The BBC Radio Light Entertainment Department has a long and glorious history. If we go back to the 1940s, we can recall such shows as Bandwagon.
Wendy challenged.
That's the only one I could recall.
Hesitation.
Yes, that's right. 23.
Itmar was the one I was trying to think of.
Oh, yes. And much binding in the marsh.
It's no good to me now, is it, Sweetie?
23 seconds for you, Wendy, on BBC Radio starting now.
I have done several plays for BBC.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Repetition of done.
I've only just started.
No, you said it.
I'm
I
very...
could have been at home watching the weather forecast.
Wendy, if you really
I
did...
video-
It's all right,
Videotaped it, Solly.
sweetie, don't worry. Go on.
Miss Derek who challenged you,
Oh, well,
I
go
didn't.
on then. Do
Right.
another list.
21 seconds, Derek, on BBC Radio starting now.
The guy writer in charge of BBC Radio's one, David Hatch, who was the first person to direct this particular programme many years ago, when he also performed in a very well-known wireless programme, which was called, I'm sorry, I'll do that again.
Stephen Fry.
You said direct this programme and then a very well-known wireless programme.
What's wrong with that?
Wireless programme.
Programme,
You
yes,
used the
said
word
it twice.
programme.
I see too many
I think you're not allowed
programmes.
to repeat words,
Yes.
Derek. I think that's
Absolutely,
a clue.
yes.
Too many programs. Right. BBC Radio's with you, Stephen. 8 seconds left, starting now.
Of course, the original Gauleiter of the BBC was David. You're allowed to do that.
Imitation.
Yes.
Very bad one.
So he was deviating from his normal voice.
And incoherent, yes. Deviation.
5 seconds for you to tell us something about BBC Radio, starting now.
The 9th...
And Derek Nimmo challenge.
Hesitation.
No. 4.5 seconds on BBC Radio, Paul, starting now.
The 1950s saw such...
Stephen Fry.
And it's repetition 19. He was talking about the 1940s
Yes, you
earlier
talked
on.
about the 1940s for the before, now you've got the 1950s, so that is repetition 19.
Extraordinary decision, Sweetie.
He's a honey puddle,
But,
isn't he?
I'll never survive this, I really won't. There are 2 seconds for you, darling, on BBC Radio starting now. Stephen.
It used to be a decent institution where words like sweetie...
Right. We're turning into the most theatrical performance of Just a Minute we've ever had. Well, Derek Nimmo's still in the lead, but only 1 ahead of Paul, and he was only 1 ahead of Stephen, and Wendy's catching up on the 3 of them. And Paul Merton, your turn to begin. The subject, deal. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
Well, a deal, I suppose, is an arrangement between 1 or 2 people, or perhaps even more. For instance, if I was to say to Nicholas Parsons, I will give you £15 for that jacket, that would be a very good deal as far as Nicholas was concerned.
Wendy challenged.
It's 2 Nicholases.
Yeah, there are 2 Nicholases, and you can't have too much of Nicholas, can you? Except in just a minute. So, Wendy, a correct challenge. 42 seconds, starting now.
I enjoy going round antique markets and hopefully get...
And Stephen Fry challenge.
There's a spot of a hesitation now.
I'm afraid it was,
think.
yes. Stephen, you have the subject of deal. 37 seconds, starting now.
I think it's a town on the south coast where resides one of my very favourite living authors, Simon Raven, author of the Arms to Oblivion series.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Repetition of author.
No, authors, an author, I think it was.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, right, all right.
Yes. So, Paul is working for Stephen Fry, and Stephen, incorrect challenge. You still have the subject of deal. 31 seconds starting now.
A hardwood from a non-renewable source, I believe. Our desks at school were made of deal, and very tough and resilient they were, too. I carved into the deal my initials, S.J.F., and put next to it, I hate Mr. Miller, in very large letters. Deal can take that kind of punishment, shove on some polish, and there it is, good as new the very next day. What deal can't take, however, is fire.
Paul, challenge.
Repetition of take.
Yes,
Oh.
yes, he can take it,
Nice.
but he can't take
Fine.
it.
I
Yes.
like that.
So, Paul, you have a correct challenge. 8 seconds to tell us something about deal starting now.
I once entered a remarkable deal with a friend of mine. I bet him 15...
Stephen
Why did
Fry.
I say
15 was the sum offered
That's
ludicrously for your jacket.
You rudely offered for my jacket.
Could have said anything but 15.
Well, that was only because you have a guilty conscience about being so rude about my jacket, you see.
I think it's a good price.
Stephen, you had a correct challenge. You've still got the subject of deal, and you have 2 seconds. That's all starting now.
Gentlemen, we have a deal, are the words which greet you when you first...
Well, you'll be interested to hear that our first-time player of the game, Stephen Fry, has, with the success he's achieved and the style that he's shown and some of the other crazes
The
that he's
best
come
term
up,
of endearment I ever spent, wasn't it?
Yes.
Calling me sweetie.
you've taken the lead ahead of Derek Nimmo and Paul Merton, who are equal in second place as we come to the last round. And Wendy, the subject is style. Will you tell us something about that subject in this game starting now?
Style is something you cannot acquire. You either have it or not. Nicholas has a modicum of style, as one can see by this wonderful jacket that Paul Merton seems determined to give him 15 quid for. Personally, I think he's being slightly over-generous. But from a distance, the said garment does look all right. I like to think...
Derek Nimmo, chap.
Hesitation.
No.
I was drawing from...
Well, your mouth out like a goldfish. I can see your tonsils, you know.
Oh,
You
yes.
shouldn't have been looking so closely, Derek. Wendy, I disagree with the challenge. You have another point. You have style, and you keep going in style for 38 seconds if you can, starting now.
Style could also be the way one interprets a role or a piece of music if one is a singer, and like...
Stephen
that was
Fry.
Well, I thought there was a bit of hesitation there.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen.
No,
Yes, it was a bit of hesitation. So, Stephen, you have 29 seconds to tell us something about style, starting now.
Le style, c'est l'homme, somebody said, French, I expect, meaning the style is the man. There was Das Stil, of course, which was an artistic movement in the early 20th century, also known as neoplasticism, of which Mondrian was a leading proponent. Style, however, is also regarded...
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Out of Nicholas Parsons' depth.
You speak for yourself, Derek.
Can you repeat any of that?
Yes, all those neoplasticism of the 18th century and the sobriquet of Le Style for everything. I was listening, actually, for hesitation, repetition, and deviation. No, I won't give you a bonus point for a rotten challenge. I'll just let Stephen have a point for being interrupted. And 15 seconds on style, starting now.
Rather raffish quality of people like Noel Coward is always considered to be an epitome of style of the 20th century. Beau Brummel, perhaps in the 18th and latter part of the... Complete drivel.
Hesitation.
Yes,
I
yes.
thought you were going to get him for repetition of the. 18th, 19th. Seems to work with 19, doesn't it?
6 seconds are left, Derek, for you to tell us something about style, starting now.
I remember helping this old lady over a style, and she was immensely great.
Stephen Fry challenge.
I can see on the card it's written S-T-Y-L-E, not S-T-I-L-E.
But, Stephen, I have to explain, it is how it sounds. We're on radio at the moment.
Realise.
We're not-
Homophones are all right, are they?
Oh, yes, yes.
Good.
You took deal as, of course, that's all spelt the same way, but it doesn't
Yes,
matter.
it is. It's spelled exactly the same way, Nicholas. Fair enough. No. I take your point absolutely. I never spoke.
Yes, it is radio. It's how
I'm
it
a
sounds.
silly old fool. Pay me no, never mind.
No,
It's
it
fine.
doesn't.
Don't
No,
worry.
you've given Derek another point, I'm afraid, and he has 3 seconds to continue in style, starting
I
now.
picked up my style on the wax tablet and inscribed my name, which was...
And Derek, keeping going very cleverly until the whistle went and gaining that all-important extra point for speaking as the whistle went, you have gone 1 point ahead. So let me give you the final score. Wendy, who's done so well in the past, gave us full measure again, but finished in 4th place. Paul Merton, who always gives full value, finished in 3rd place. Stephen Fry, who's not played the game, and he played it like a real sweetie. He really did. And... did extraordinarily well. He came only 1 point behind the chap who's got most points, so we call him the winner this week, Derek Nemo. We do hope that you have enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute and will want to tune in again at the same time next week. It only remains for me to say now on behalf of our players of the game, Wendy Richard, Derek Nimmo, Stephen Fry, and Paul Merton, and Anne Ling, who's been keeping the score, and also the creator of the game, Ian Messiter, and our producer, Sarah Smith, and myself, Nicholas Parsons. Thank you very much for tuning in. We hope you'll be with us again the next time we all play Just a Minute. Bye-bye.